Hello everyone, this is Michael Minicino, a sales consultant with Oracle Corporation, and I'm recording this short video to show how easy it is to concurrently access shares from the ZFS storage appliance with both Windows and Unix and Linux clients. So this is demonstrating an environment where users can log into either Windows workstations or Unix and Linux systems and have a need to access the same share from both platforms, and most importantly, to have their identities mapped between Unix and Linux and Windows. So to accomplish this, we are going to use NIS as well as Active Directory, and we are going to sync the credentials between those two platforms. And I'm going to show just how easy that is to accomplish with the ZFS storage appliance. The NIS server can honestly be run anywhere. Most Unix and Linux systems support NIS. You just simply have to configure the server and turn it on, and then administer the credentials there. And then Windows systems can be used to stand up Active Directory on separate pieces of infrastructure. For the purpose of this demonstration, I am using the Identity Management for Unix feature that Microsoft provides. This is a feature where you can turn on NIS services on your Active Directory servers, and those servers will then respond to both Unix and Linux clients as well as Windows clients, providing the same credentials via both NIS and Active Directory. So that is optional. However, the way I have this set up on the ZFS storage appliance is generic, in that the NIS server could be running anywhere. So, as you can see here in the foreground, here is my Windows server as well as my Windows client, where I'll show access to these shares. But before I get to that, let's go take a look at how the ZFS storage appliance is set up. So we have NIS services enabled. So this controller is joined to NIS, as well as Active Directory. So we're joined to the Active Directory domain. And the identity mapping service is what's doing all of the work. So after we configure this controller to connect to NIS and join it to Active Directory, we configure identity mapping. So the mapping mode is currently rule-based. This is the mode that I mentioned earlier, where the NIS server can be running anywhere, independent of Windows. There is a special mode called IDMU. This tells the controller that you're using that identity management for Unix feature, and there's no need to set up rules, because it tells the controller that the Windows servers are providing both the NIS as well as the Active Directory credentials. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we will stay with rule-based. And here are the rules. We have Windows identities and we have Unix identities. And very simply, these rules map the two. It's very easy to create a rule. We're just going to set up our domain here, and it is case sensitive. So if for whatever reason the controller sees your domain as capital, you'll have to make sure you enter it as such. Windows identity is very simply the Windows identity. And the same for the Unix identity. It's a user, and you click add, and you're all done. Mappings can be bidirectional, which I'm using here, but you could also set up one-way mappings as well. I've already pre-populated all the rules that we're going to need for this demonstration for the JDO, Michael users, as well as the Unix users and domain users groups. Another nifty feature is this mappings function, where you could test a mapping to make sure it's working properly. So we're going to enter our domain, and we're going to enter JDO, and we're going to test this out. And here we go, it's working. JDO is UID 1000. We could also test it in the opposite direction. There's the JDO AD credential. So it's a very quick way for us to test to make sure our identity mapping is working properly, which it is. Now let's take a look at the shares. We have a project that we have set up for our shares that are going to be concurrently accessed, and we have two currently pre-populated, data and files. Let's take a look at data. we are leveraging projects here in that the project has been pre-populated with all of the settings that we want for these shares. It's pre-populated to share via NFS and to share via SMB and to provide the appropriate access settings, with the exception of the owner. In this case, this data share is owned by the Active Directory user Michael, group domain users. ACL behavior is something else I want to call out. There are several settings that we can apply here, but the do not change ACL, quote unquote, is probably the best one for compatibility. This means that if a chmod or a chown is executed on a Unix or Linux platform, that change is translated into ACL. So the ACL is not removed. The chown or chmod is translated into the closest ACL representation, and the ACL is maintained. However, there are some additional settings that you could apply there, and we're going to inherit ACLs as well. So these are our settings, and we are using snapshots here as well. Here's a daily backup snapshot that I created, but just for purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to create another snapshot. And I'm going to hit apply. So snapshots are instantaneous. So now we got a snapshot of what this looked like earlier, and now we have a demo snapshot. So now let's go take a look at what this share looks like on a Windows system. So here's our snapshot directory which we have exposed. So here's my daily backup snapshot that we took earlier, and we can see a representation of what this looks like then. And now we've created another snapshot with a representation of what it looked like a couple of seconds ago. So let's go take a look at some of these directories that we have here. There's a Michael directory. The Michael directory is for the Michael user. Therefore, when we take a look at the permissions on that directory, we can see it is owned by the Michael user. Straightforward. The JDO directory was set up for the JDO user, and when we look at the permissions for that directory, we can see that it is owned by the JDO user, John Doe. So John Doe owns his directory, Michael owns his directory. And all the permissions are as expected. On this Windows system, I am logged in as the Michael user, so I am able to not only view this file, but I'm also able to change it and save it. I can come in here and add some additional text as well and save it. However, if I go into the JDO directory, I can view this, but I can't save it. So if I attempt to save it here, it's going to do a save as, because I don't have write permissions. So all these permissions are as expected on the Windows side. So now let's take a look at this from the Linux side. So I am now logged in as JDO, and that very same share that we were looking at on Windows is mounted as /data, and here we have the very same directories. I can look at the snapshots as well from Linux. I am JDO, so I can change into the JDO directory, and I can VI this file, and I can change it, and I could write it. However, if I try to change into the Michael directory, and if I try to edit this file, I'm not allowed because I can only look at it. And we can see here, it's owned by Michael, Unix users. So, the same permissions on Linux as we have on Windows. The same owners, because we have the same identities mapped between the two platforms. JDO on Windows is JDO on Linux. So whether I'm logging into this box or I'm logging into this box, I have the same identity, thus I have the same permissions. Permissions are preserved across the platforms. So now let's see what happens if I attempt to make a change on Linux. So I can't do a chown to this Unix directory. As JDO, I have to be root. So let me change over to a window where I have root access. And over here, I am going to change ownership to JDO, Unix users. So now I've changed ownership to JDO Unix users, but of course this is the same identity on both Linux and Windows, so I can go over here and take a look at this Unix directory and take a look at the properties, security, take a look at ownership, and we're going to see it's now owned by JDO. So I made the change on Linux, which also applies to Windows. Of course, I can go to my snapshot, and if I take a look at the permissions of the Unix directory in the snapshot, this will represent the previous permissions where it was owned by root. So we have the same identity between the two platforms. Now let's take a look at adding a share. So we want to go over here to our shares project, and we want another share which is going to be just solely owned by JDO. So we're going to create a file system. The file system is going to be called info. We're going to use Windows standard permissions, and we want JDO to own this with the group Unix users. Our project has all of our settings, so there's nothing else that we need to do. Just enter those few pieces of information, and we will have our share. And there's info. So now I can browse out to see what my ZFS is sharing, and now we have info. And we can take a look at the security on that, and we will see that it is owned by JDO. There we go, John Doe. And I can come back over here onto the Unix side, and I'm going to mount this info directory, and I can cd into info as JDO, and I can now create a file in here. Because I'm the same identity on both systems. I'm JDO here, I have access to this share, I own it, and I was able to create the file. So this demonstrates concurrent access via SMB and NFS to the same share with the ZFS storage appliance from both Linux and Windows clients. I appreciate everyone's time in viewing this video, and I hope everyone has a great day.